Our PLC did our project in human development and the lifespan from the social emotional perspective. Our mission statement is to analyze the impact that various cultures have on social and emotional development, specifically Hispanic, Asian, and the heteronormative nuclear white American culture. This connects to all of our career paths. We will all deal with conflict management and diverse cultures. This mission statement touches medical fields and office settings alike. Erikson presents a series of conflict points that define a person throughout the planes of development. These are areas that people achieve one or settle into the other. These conflicts tend to feel intuitive, showing points where people fall out of social groups or learn to thrive. Looking at how culture shapes people is a great way to approach Erikson and human development because it has an effect on how members process emotion and interact in social situations. Freud focuses on the conflicts that arise based on where we derive pleasure and what dealing with that appropriately or inappropriately can cause to happen in development. I thought that the article, Recent Changes in Narcissism of Chinese Youth, a cross-temporal meta-analysis between 2008 and 2017, connected strongly with social norms and the emotional effects of growing individualism worldwide. The researchers were correct in their assumption that China was a great place to observe this happening. I would expect the dramatic shift China has gone through culturally to highlight this connection as well. The study found no significant connection and showed that there might even be less diagnosed cases of narcissism rather than more. On a more personal level, millennials are tired of hearing how embracing individualism is leading to a narcissistic America. There are differences in how society treats the different genders, as shown by the study's careful control of sex because of the different expectations that could change how narcissism presents. This shows human development as complicated and nuanced. This article connects with social emotional professional learning community, addressing many groups labeling other groups outside of their own as selfish and narcissistic. Many cultures have very strict rules about how much self-centered behavior is accepted. These researchers used the shift that has been happening in China in recent history to test what effect the acceptance of individualistic thinking has had on the appearance of narcissistic personality disorder in Chinese youth. This is important when viewed through Erikson's industry versus inferiority conflict for middle childhood. Individualism and collective ideologies define what productivity looks like. This age group is already in the process of redefining themselves and how they relate to family and peers. Global shifts of cultural values move these identities dramatically. The article referenced two kinds of individualism, horizontal and vertical. These are important when discussing my career path in human resources and conflict management. One is more willing to see their independence as ultimately about improving the community around them, while the other is much more aggressive. Throughout this research, it became obvious that there were unhealthy ways to be individualistic, and it was important for emotional health for a person to have a healthy connection to community. This mindset, along with parental involvement, can grow more positive versions of self-reliance. This becomes important in conflict management between groups and for healthy relationships in both a person's professional and personal life. This doesn't just apply to middle childhood or children. Erikson's approach defines what base conflicts drive how people relate to society.
In this article, Parenting Strategies and Social Cultural Influences in Childhood Anxiety, it states the different factors that a household in Latin American origin would face in comparison to an average white American household. Aspects such as assimilation, language barrier, socioeconomic status, marital status, family cohesion, and of course, anxiety. With these differentiating factors, the study states that children in these households are statistically more at risk of developing some sort of anxiety disorder than their European counterparts. Each aspect played a role in the development of anxiety, and prominence or absence of certain aspects led to different manifestations of anxiety. The study conducted connects to my career path because in analyzing the effects that a household of culture can have on development is an important part of psychiatry and becomes important in the case of trying to better understand one's trauma. Not only is it vital to the field of psychiatry, but it proves important to everyone in everyday life struggling with overcoming their source of anxiety.
Dysfunction causing cultural aspects for children. Parts of certain cultures, such as Asian and Hispanic cultures, focus on working and providing for the family, which causes the parents to have less time to spend with their kids, which in turn limits the social interaction and development of the child because the child doesn't feel out their place in society. Another aspect is the parents' role in the relationship. Certain cultures, such as the Hispanic cultures, have a stricter role in their culture that most caregivers must follow. In Hispanic cultures, fathers are supposed to be a stern guiding hand, which teaches what is okay and what's not. And this strict role prevents the parent from having other roles and other types of relationships with their child, such as being a friend, like in white American families where the father serves as a guiding hand, sort of, but he can also serve as a sort of friend who the child can rely on. Another thing is that spending less time or not spending time with your children at all uh, limits the social interaction time, and limiting the social interactive time, as I said before, it make it makes the child not understand their place, and it limits the new situations and environments in which a child can experience new emotions and develop correctly. Using this information, we can see that as nurses or people in the medical fields, like my other group members, we should do our best to make sure that we interact with the children to help them develop correctly, so that we make sure to provide the best possible care.
So in my article, Nguyen just deconstructs how American culture, media, and sociologists portray Vietnamese refugees' assimilation after the Vietnam War, and how because these Vietnamese immigrants were more civilized than the racialized version that white American Midwestern families had thought of them previously. And since they assimilated quite well and, dressed in nice outfits and were part of nuclear families and conformed to a lot of the heteronormativity, patriarchal standards, and also a bunch of the like nuclear white standards that a lot of the American standards are based off during that time period. American culture and sociologists portrayed them as the golden immigrants. This is harmful in a lot of different ways. American media and sociologists use this idea of these golden immigrants or the Vietnamese golden family standards as a way to weaponize them and compare them against brown and black communities. In a study by sociologists in like the 70s during the later wave of Vietnamese immigration, They studied Vietnamese children in the South, I believe in Louisiana, that grew up around Black and Brown communities. They said that Vietnamese children that hung out with their Brown and Black neighbors and were a part of the community, they said that they were therefore failing their Vietnamese ancestral values and becoming corrupt. Whereas they praised Vietnamese children that didn't hang out with their brown and Black neighbors and just stuck to their homes and did not interact with their diverse neighborhood. They said that those were good kids that were keeping the strong ancestral ties. This shows how both researchers and American cultures have used immigrants and people of color to highlight the differences between them and weaponize them against brown and Black people, therefore showing the indoctrinated racism in America and American culture. This matters to us because the idea of proper American culture is obviously very toxic, and this kind of like 1950s American culture of like white heteronormativity that is deeply based in patriarchal beliefs and racism is just not the reality of what America should be or what it is today. By understanding how toxic this culture is and how media and science can portray and try to portray us as Americans, we can therefore see that past narrative, acknowledge the hurt that this past narrative of Americanism has caused, and therefore change the narrative and create new meanings of what it is to have American values and be an American person. This relates to my future as a nurse because it demonstrates how scientific studies can perpetuate the racist and harmful beliefs of their creators, and it allows me to be able to acknowledge and identify the inherent prejudices that may be in research and may actually be enacted in medical procedures and studies. And therefore, by understanding that, I can therefore combat it and become a better nurse for all of my patients.
My name is Alex. I aspire to be a future art therapist. When we talk about the balance between social interaction and the emotions we feel and the feelings we portray, one of the big factors that can lead to a lot of mental health issues in the future and a lot of need for introspection is bullying. And a lot of that can happen in the adolescent years of middle school and high school. Brooke was talking a lot about how in the past, sociologists have seen how the white patriarchal society has praised young brown children, Vietnamese children for excluding their darker skinned neighbors and adopting more Western values that the patriarchy has told them is would be a blasphemy to their tradition otherwise. We see that a lot happening when kids start finding their identity and their cliques during their teen years. In 2019, psychologists Flack and Woyek asked 20 adults how the extent to which each of them had been bullied in their lives. It was a pretty diverse population, but it wasn't a lot of people. But what they found is that each person had a different definition of what bullying is to begin with. So they saw it as conditional to the location or the time or who is around you, which led them to see bullying only happens in certain situations like when you're trying to fit in with a group, or when you're trying to be authentic and help your friend, which led to the rise of what they call the frenemy. Someone who is a friend most of the time, but maybe in other groups would sideline that same friend or even bully them around others. This is kind of a failure of the Good Samaritan trope. What would you do if you saw someone bullying, especially if you were their friend? Would you help them because it's the right thing to do, or would you stop yourself from doing that so that you don't look so down upon by the others? And what that's really done through generations of this, white culture, basically, we have isolated the cultures in schools, and if they don't go to college, or if they don't have a lot of interaction between different cultures, they will stay in the groups in high school that they were in, and they will stay in this echo chamber of sticking with their tribe. So we find that happens a lot in high school. It might be easier to find white people bullying people of color rather than white people bullying other white people, for example. This is to say to the audience that humans are not infallible. We can both be victims and perpetrators of bullying and violence. I know I grew up with a lot of bullying, but I can't say that I never perpetrated it ever, even if it was what I saw as justice, or I was jealous of what someone else was able to do. It starts with one person to stop the cycle, and that's basically what we're trying to do as healers in the community, conflict resolution. So in order for effective learning to occur, a safe environment must be ensured. So that starts with everyone. Bullying prevention literally saves lives. There's a lot of studies about this that I can't even skim the surface of. But when it comes to being an art therapist, it is important because art is special in that it is creativity is needed for everyone of all ages. And if someone is prevented from having their creative outlet, being able to do that, basically, they can harbor a lot of anger and a lot of emotions that they will want to project or find a scapegoat for. And that's how this cycle continues.
Here's a video that shows an inclusive environment in classroom that we like that connects to bullying in school, but also is a better example of what we think the culture of America should be.
Anything else special happened this weekend, friends?
In the pool, I did a cannonball. I know how to swim.
You know how to swim?
I know how to blow bubbles underwater.
You
Me
do?
too.
As human beings, one of the most essential needs we have is the need to belong. In school, children need a sense of belonging to be able to be productive learners. They need to be connected to their fellow students, connected to their teachers, to also be affirmed in who they are in a way that is positive and accepting.
I don't take swimming lessons.
In a belonging classroom, there's a community being explicitly built. the teacher knows each child and things about each of those children that they can mention and draw on.
I pay attention, I listen. I'm really invested in what they tell me. The students feeling loved, students feeling nurtured, students feeling like they have a place at school, they're safe. It activates their brain cells.
What side were you?
Sense of belonging is one of the most important activators of a child's engagement in learning. Everything about activating a child's cognitive skills begins with activating their social connectedness. The energy for learning is coming from the social connection that children have.
But in the end, we're trying to come up with an agreement.
Excellent.
We're not going to comment, question. We're only going to encourage. Because they're culturally and linguistically diverse students, I want to really make sure that we are making them feel connections. All the writing we do in our class, it's very much about them. It helps them, promotes them to find their own voice and to share their stories.
Sometimes people think every Muslim person is a target or is a terrorist.
Thank you, Anissa.
What did this show us about what we are good at as a group?
Working together, because we often argue a lot.
Today we did an activity that was really designed to get them thinking about how they're going to support each other. I think that reiterating the idea that we're in this together, I think it's hard to find the time, but doing some team building exercises at the beginning of the year and revisiting them can really help illustrate that point.
In a belonging classroom, they have a community that may meet in classroom meetings to problem solve together, to read stories together, to tell successes and accomplishments or important events together. They celebrate like families do, things that each other have done or have experienced.
Let's talk about what we admire about some of our friends.
I admire Jazara because she is so compassionate.
And when we're talking about being compassionate and being supportive of one another, it's to build that deeper connection for everyone, just to feel like this is their school family, this is somewhere they're loved, they're nurtured, they're taken care of, they're valued.
Thank you for speaking.
The community becomes a place where you can bring your emotions, your fears, your needs. You can be honest about what's going on and know that there will be acceptance, support, and love that's available to carry you through.
We all can work together and we all can try to strategize together and create a better pathway for others to be successful. And we can make it fun.
They're working together. They take care of each other, not just personally, but academically.
We're always pushing each other.
Children of immigrants and their mental health. Many children help support their parents financially because the government does not support them the same as other Americans. This makes children feel responsible at a very young age. There is also pressure put on the children to be as successful as possible to elevate the family. This creates anxiety, depression, and stress in many cases. There are many factors that contribute and fluctuate these results. Most of the variables are race, culture, gender, and legal status. The children of Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, and Latinx immigrants have significantly higher rates of depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder compared to the children of white European immigrants. The nuclear family. There used to be a standard family in America of a mom, dad, and many children. The mom stays home to take care of the kids and the dad works to create their sole income. Over the years, family dynamics have become more diverse, which is for the better. Some people fit into this model, but most do not. Unfortunately, some still think this is the only acceptable way for families to look, which creates a toxic environment for anyone who does not align with it. Most immigrants are told the American dream, which includes the nuclear family. This can go against their culture or religion. Also, many immigrant families need both parents to work to afford living in America.
Here's two minds, a get together. So Sigmund Freud and Erik Erikson both talked about the individual and the types of relationship the individual has with one another. In the nature versus nurture debate, he says that an individual is driven by innate biological instincts, which is the nature part, and those instincts are expressed by the social and cultural environment, which is nurture. He also states that how a child is given care at an early age determines the type of relationships that one will have with one another. For Erik Erikson's psychosocial development stages, trust versus mistrust from stages 1 to from birth to 1 year old. He states that the child is dependent on the caregivers, and with trust, the child feels safe and secure in the world. With autonomy versus shame, the child is trying to build independence and self-control. And in identity versus role confusion, the child is experiencing different roles, activities, and behaviors. In some cultures, though, there are boundaries, and which could lead them to not being able to try things that they like, interfering with their identity and roles. So abuse can take forms in different forms, physical, mental, and neglect. And some cultures, again, stating with the boundaries are set, or just like having high expectations and standards, not meeting that high expectations or standards will allow that child to feel like a failure, which could affect them internally, which also affects the social relationships they have with other people. And in a integrative review of nurses' roles and experiences in keeping children safe, there were 60 studies that reported the way that their nurses' roles and experiences in safeguarding children. There were reports of reduced families' trust in their nurse or reported abuse, and with trust, it interferes with actually allowing a report to be reported. Nurses desired further education around mandated reporting, as in they had insufficient knowledge on how to report, when and how to report abuse. Importance of pediatric care to children of victims of abuse. This applies to like if they're dealing with something at home, and when they go to like the hospital to talk to the nurse about the issues at home, nurses are, they allow nurses to take control of that and help them in any way that they can. But in conclusion, nurses need support and further education to combat insufficient knowledge of abuse, and they need validation and help in balancing surveillance and support for vulnerable families. Key things to take away, why it matters. In the social and emotional aspect, the individual has a personal awareness of their own identity. They could build positive relationships with their self and with others, and just getting the appropriate help early on to prevent damaging effects later on. Things to consider, Montessori teaching and lifestyle, which is allowing the children to have their freedom to choose what they like, and which also builds onto their identity. And authoritative parenting styles, which allows the child to understand why some rules are set, and getting like the appropriate things that they need emotionally, and proper education and support for nurses to help children. in terms of career path, in regards to the healthcare field, aspiring students and staff members now can address current issues and brainstorm solutions to prevent causes. In addition, having the ability to understand oneself and others' emotions can help others drastically in terms of social interactions and creating meaningful projects within any other career choice.
Conclusion. The impact that various cultures have on social and emotional development, specifically Hispanic, Asian, and the heteronormative nuclear white American culture, can have damaging effects on the individual. However, with proper help ranging from medical, seeking therapy, being able to get the help at an early age, and in easy access to get help through centers with the use of social media and education in schools, it is possible to get the help needed to get one to live a healthier lifestyle.